China is a country of extremes. Futuristic skyscrapers stand alongside ancient temples. Elderly people practice Tai Chi while walking robotic dogs. Gucci stores sit in shopping malls dedicated to Mao, and its economy works the same way. China has made some extremely risky bets. Some paid off big time, like solar panels and batteries. Others ended in disaster, like the real estate bubble. But now, Beijing faces its most ambitious gamble to date, escaping the OPEC of semiconductors. That is, escaping the US, Taiwan, Netherlands axis that controls the most advanced chips on the planet. Because Xi Jinping has an obsession: achieving technological sovereignty, being able to compete against Western semiconductors, to create the world's best artificial intelligence, running on 100% Chinese hardware. And believe me, he's sparing no expense.
DeepSeek nears $45 billion valuation as China's big fund leads investment talks. China's largest state-backed semiconductor investment vehicle is in talks to lead the financing of DeepSeek's first fundraising round, which could value the AI group at approximately $45 billion.
The Chinese government is going all out. As an aside, the government launched the China Integrated Circuit Industry Investment Fund, which, given its very long name, is simply known as the Big Fund. Big, because it's a truly massive investment, even for China. The problem? Well, so far, the results have been mixed. The latest version of DeepSeek, China's top AI, has been quite disappointing. And while it's true that some chip manufacturers have made significant strides, they are still very, very far from Xi Jinping's vision. So many people are asking themselves, are we facing a new bubble in China? A silicon bubble? Will all this investment be enough to break away from the OPEC of microchips? Or will we see another failure like what happened with housing? We'll tell you all about it in this video. But before we continue, if you're interested in the world of investing, if you want to learn how to manage your savings, protect yourself against inflation, and figure out how to make money beyond your day job, I've got some news for you. At Visual Factory, we've created the Visual Factory Club, a newsletter where every week we send out free content focused on essential financial education, the ABC of what everyone should know to understand the stock market, financial markets in general, investment platforms, how to assess investment opportunities, and which markets may have more or less potential. Because of course, if you want to invest your money so you're not at the mercy of your country's economic instability, you at least need to understand the basics of the financial world. In the Visual Factory Club, you'll learn all of this completely free of charge. Through the link below and this QR code, you can sign up for the club and start receiving the upcoming editions. What's more, when you sign up, you'll receive a dossier where I explain, in a clear and simple way, the most essential investment concepts. What multiples or the PE ratio are, what indices are, ETFs, derivatives, funds, EPS, you get the idea. After that, every week you'll receive additional materials and market analysis to help you stay informed about what's going on. And by the way, the sooner you sign up, the better, since we send each episode of the series by email, and every edition is unique. If you're not subscribed, you might miss some of them, and you won't be able to access them later. But with that said, let's get into the video. If China has proven anything, it's that it can take a technology that's still in its infancy and become the world leader in just a few years. We've seen it with electric vehicles, drones, batteries. In just a decade, Chinese companies are sweeping aside Western companies that have been in the business for nearly a century. So naturally, when Xi Jinping decided that made in China microchips would be a top national priority, the rest of the world watched closely to see if the miracle would happen again. And take it from me, Xi Jinping's decision was no accident. Between 2018 and 2019, the Trump administration blocked exports of advanced lithography machines to China, citing the Wassenaar Arrangement. This is important because this agreement regulates dual-use technologies. That is, those with both civilian and military applications. Basically, the US was saying that China could not access either the most advanced microchips or the machines that manufacture those microchips. And here we need to make one thing very clear. Semiconductors are crucial to both the economy and the military, and China is completely dependent on the West to obtain them. Chinese chips, those designed by companies like Huawei, are still far behind Nvidia's in terms of performance. And by far behind, we mean more than a 5-year technological gap. But when it comes to chips, both design and manufacturing capability matter. And here too, the news isn't very good for China. SMEE, one of the few Chinese companies that manufactures lithography machines, machines to etch these chips operates in the 90 and 65 nanometer range, far behind the 2 or 3 nanometer mark, which is the current technological frontier, which is why we talk about a veritable OPEC of semiconductors. 3 countries control almost the entire global supply chain. The United States dominates design, Nvidia is in a league of its own, AMD is trying to keep up, and Intel is starting to wake up. Even giants like Google and Amazon are already manufacturing their own AI chips, because if you want to train the most powerful artificial intelligence models on the planet, you absolutely need Nvidia's famous GPUs. Huawei tried to find a shortcut, connecting hundreds of its best chips into a sort of supercloud. And take note, it worked better than expected, but it consumes a ton of energy, scales terribly, and is still far from the American level. Now let's imagine that China achieves the impossible, that Huawei, or any of the thousands of Chinese companies trying to do so, designs a chip as good as Nvidia's. It would still face another massive problem: manufacturing it. Because 70% of global chip production is in the hands of one single company, Taiwan's TSMC. And when it comes to truly advanced chips, that percentage borders on a monopoly. Here's an important caveat. China does manufacture 7 nanometer chips for Huawei. The problem is how it manufactures them. They use techniques like multi-patterning, a kind of industrial trick that allows them to create smaller chips, but ones that are much less efficient, more expensive, and significantly less powerful than TSMC's real chips. And even if China managed to copy that as well, it would still hit another wall. Because TSMC relies on machines manufactured by only one company in the world, the Dutch firm ASML, probably the most sophisticated technology company in all of Europe. Without ASML, there are no cutting-edge chips. And here's the key. Those machines are banned from entering China. Not even the less advanced versions are sold freely. This is how this microchip OPEC works. The United States designs, Taiwan manufactures. Europe provides the machines. Nvidia, TSMC, and ASML. 3 pieces, 3 countries, and practically no one has managed to escape that dependence. The big exception is Samsung. South Korea has spent decades building its own supply chain and can now manufacture state-of-the-art chips almost from start to finish. But it took years, billions of dollars, and a lot of Western help. Xi Jinping wants to do the same, but in record time, and without foreign aid. In fact, the tech war has reached a surreal point. While Trump was considering allowing certain Nvidia exports to China, the Chinese government itself began restricting some of those graphics cards to force its companies to use domestic technology. It's an all-or-nothing gamble. The problem is that China has already made a similar bet in the past, and it ended up becoming one of the country's biggest tech scams. The Chinese Theranos.
Billion-dollar heist, how scammers rode China's chip boom to riches. How did an audacious crew of scammers with high school educations, but rumored party backing, convince a district government hungry for chip-making glory to invest billions of RMB into their factory?
In just 3 years, a Chinese startup that came out of virtually nowhere achieved something incredible, convincing half the country that it was going to break the Western monopoly on microchips. And with that promise, it stole more than $2 billion in subsidies, loans, and public investments. On top of that, its valuation reached $18.5 billion, only to vanish overnight. They deceived China. They deceived TSMC. And most surreal of all, they also deceived ASML, with profound consequences for the relationship between the Netherlands and China. The story of HSMC reads like a movie script, but it explains very well why so many analysts are now talking about a possible silicon bubble in China. It all began during Trump's first tech war. The United States began blocking Chinese access to advanced machinery, and Beijing went into panic mode. Just then, HSMC appeared with an almost miraculous promise. They claimed they could manufacture 30,000 14-nanometer chips and another 30,000 7-nanometer chips. And remember something important, at that time, China was still a long way from that. It still is now, so just imagine. So, how did an unknown company get anyone to believe it? For 3 reasons. First, China was in a hurry. A very big hurry. Second, local governments were desperate to create the national champion of semiconductors. They competed with each other through massive subsidies to gain political prestige in Beijing. And third, the founders of HSMC were extraordinarily good con artists. When the company began to gain notoriety, they decided to pull off the big heist. They contacted Chiang Shang-yi. The name might not ring a bell, but but in the world of microchips, he was a legend. Former vice president of TSMC and one of the most respected engineers in the entire industry, and HSMC sold him a dream. They didn't just promise him money, they promised to shift the global technological balance, and Chiang took the bait. He saw Chinese banks, government funds, and local authorities backing the project and agreed to become the CEO. Of course, as soon as the rest of the industry saw that, HSMC went from being an unknown startup to becoming China's great hope. More investments poured in, more subsidies, and even former TSMC employees began moving to China, following their ex-boss's lead. But the real game changer was yet to come. With all that mix of propaganda, connections, and political pressure, HSMC managed to convince ASML to sell them a fairly advanced DUV machine, a technology that was right on the edge of Western restrictions. And of course, that changed everything, because now HSMC had top-tier engineers and also the tools needed to compete. Or so it seemed. The reality is that the company never managed to manufacture a single microchip, not a single one. What's more, it didn't even finish building the factory. It was all smoke and mirrors. A colossal lie that grew little by little, fueled by government money, propaganda, and a national obsession with catching up to the West. And of course, imagine ASML's reaction when it discovered who it had sold one of the most sophisticated machines on the planet to. Let's just say that since then, the Dutch haven't exactly been flexible with China. But the really important question is this: why are we telling you this story? Because it perfectly explains why China is spending absurd amounts of money on semiconductors, and why more and more people are beginning to wonder if we're looking at a new tech bubble.
There has also been a surge in the construction of intelligent computing centers in China. Yet, a report identifies a major but neglected issue with this rush: computing centers remaining idle or even shutting down due to irresponsible investments and insufficient demand. According to 2022 data, 42% of servers in data centers were not placed on racks and put into use.
HSMC was just the most scandalous case, but behind it lay something much bigger: a veritable semiconductor gold rush. As soon as the subsidies started pouring in, half the country wanted to jump on the bandwagon. Between 2018 and 2020, government funding for the sector increased sixfold, and the number of startups focused on microchips grew by 50%. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, because in China, the most significant phenomenon wasn't the new companies, but the old ones. Companies that used to manufacture something else entirely and suddenly decided to pivot towards semiconductors. And yes, following the HSMC disaster, Beijing tightened control significantly. Now, they scrutinize subsidies with a fine-tooth comb. The problem is that the money had already created an entire parallel industry of inflated projects, doctored figures, and half-ghost technology centers. And this is where the famous data centers come in. Because during the generative AI boom in 2022, China began building servers and data centers as if there were no tomorrow. But there was one small problem: 40% of those servers were offline. The reason? Many of these facilities simply didn't know how to use the GPUs they had purchased properly. Because a data center isn't just a warehouse full of graphics cards running separately. You have to coordinate them, optimize power consumption, distribute workloads, and design complex architectures. And if you don't know how to do that, it doesn't matter how many chips you have, you can't train truly powerful models. Well, assuming the data center actually exists, because yes, some projects were entirely smoke and mirrors. On paper, many of these projects looked like they were straight out of Silicon Valley. In practice, they were empty warehouses with 4 racks and plenty of grants. And this isn't an exception. It's a pattern. Want another example? Humanoid robots. I'm sure you've seen those spectacular videos of Chinese robots doing kung fu, playing soccer, or performing impossible flips. And yes, they are impressive. The question is a different one. Who is paying for all of this? Because as far as being profitable, it certainly doesn't seem to be. At least, not without help.
Just 9% of Unitree's shipments went to real-world uses, such as logistics or industrial settings. Tourism authorities, local governments, and state-owned enterprises have invested heavily in display robots, a use case that is less sustainable than deploying androids in commercial settings.
But remember, losing money at the start isn't necessarily a bad sign. It took Uber years to turn a profit. The problem lies elsewhere. Many Chinese companies survive not because they have a great business model, but because the state keeps them on life support. Subsidies, cheap cheap loans, free land, the perfect recipe for inflating a bubble. Exactly what happened with housing. That said, it doesn't mean everything is going to blow up, because China has already done something similar with solar panels, batteries, and electric cars, sectors rife with waste, corruption, and zombie companies, from which ultra-competitive giants like BYD also emerged. And that is Beijing's real bet. China doesn't care about losing billions on 20 HSMCs if, in the process, it manages to create a Chinese Nvidia. Is it succeeding? Well, not quite yet. DeepSeek, the most advanced Chinese AI, has been quite disappointing, and in general, Chinese AIs are evolving more slowly than American ones. What's more, they are trained primarily using Nvidia chips. In other words, China still depends on the technology it's trying to replace, particularly for cutting-edge applications. Are there any advances? Of course there are. Huawei already has its own operating system, Harmony OS, to reduce its reliance on Android. It has also developed its own alternative to CUDA, Nvidia's programming language. And companies like Xi'an Eswin are already producing silicon wafers on a large scale. In 2019, China was virtually non-existent in this sector. These days, it accounts for nearly 30% of global production. No trivial matter. The problem is that, for now, almost all of these are substitutes for Western technology, not better products. When a Huawei user can switch back to Android, they flee from Harmony OS. When a programmer can use GitHub instead of Gitty, they use GitHub, which, for good reasons, has 7 times as many users. The fact is that reinventing an entire tech ecosystem from scratch is extremely expensive, slow, and inefficient. Believe me, nothing would please Huawei's engineers more than being able to work peacefully with Nvidia graphics cards so they can focus on other things, but the tech war is forcing them to reinvent the wheel. And here's what's truly important. Bubbles come and go. But this is no longer just about wasted money. It's about a radical shift in the economic model, moving from a world based on global cooperation to one based on replacing the rival at any cost. And that could indeed change the global economy for decades. In any case, now that we've reached this point, it's your turn. Do you think China is experiencing a bubble with all this momentum it's putting into semiconductors? Or on the contrary, will the major successes offset all these cases of fraud and inefficiencies? What future do you see for the sector in China? Remember, if you really want to understand what's happening in the markets and learn how to manage your money with more confidence, join the Visual Factory Club. It's completely free and the link's in the description. And as always, don't forget that here on Visualeconomik, we release new videos every week, so subscribe to the channel, click the little bell icon so you don't miss any of our updates. If you like this video, hit like, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. I'll see you next time.